my team initially, Danielle Peabody and Stephen Stewart and everybody else who's not here, for helping make this and everything happen. It was over 25 years ago that the Dean of Fine Arts at PSU said, you have to meet Barbara Sternberger and her husband Ed Burrell. And I saw a little piece in their home. I'm like, wow, I fell in love with your work. And for 25 years, the gallery's been exhibiting Barbara's work. And I have to say, it's been super rewarding for me and your audience to see you master your process and your paint, especially the last 3 shows. It's just been incredible and so well received. So Barbara was born in Vancouver, BC, and received her MFA from the University of California in Irvine. She's exhibited in LA and New York and Seattle. And as I mentioned, we've been exhibiting her work for over 25 years, which is awesome. And she has, she's in several museum collections in the Northwest and received the Nettie Award, Artist Trust, and a special recognition from the Betty Bowen. And I know you're really here to hear about Barbara and her process, which is amazing. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming Barbara Sternberger.
Thank you. Thank you. And while we're on the thank yous, thank you guys all for coming on this sunny, beautiful day. And a big thank you to Liz. Like she said, this is a milestone for me. This is my 10th solo exhibition here. And the first time I met Liz, she came up to Ed and I's place in Bellingham, and she, she left with, I don't know, 8 paintings or something, and it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship and relationship. And of course, over the years, everybody's come and gone and come again, and for years and years now, Daniel and the new team member, Stephen, and it's just so nice for me to get to know these people closely because I live in Bellingham. I'm not like the other artists here that are really part of a family. I come in and go, so it's just, I'm getting a little gushy, but on my 10th solo show, I can do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give this talk in 4 little parts, okay? The first part is going to be just my philosophy on painting, and the second part is going to be on practice and process, which is usually, the bulk of it, okay? And then I'm going to talk about these paintings in particular. And finally, I'm going to talk about any questions, answer any questions you guys might have. And I encourage you to ask questions because I know this stuff inside out. I could talk for hours and hours and hours, but if you guys have anything in particular, just ask. Nothing's too, off the board to do it. And as always, before I give any lecture or any talk, I always do a quick disclaimer. And this disclaimer I started when I was still in, I think, graduate school. And that is that art is subjective, okay? So when I'm talking, I'm not talking about any fact that is down in art history and, is in stone. I'm talking about my subjective views, okay? So there's no need to go into other conversations about is this true or is this true. This is, painting according to my view of it, okay? So that said, let me tell you a little bit about my philosophy in painting. And I have kind of dedicated my life to this, and I call this a practice, okay? And it's what I do on a daily basis. And I have found that this journey has been ever evolving, ever changing, and always rewarding. But make no doubt, it is not easy. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of sacrifice. But it is worth it's worth it completely. And over the years, my philosophy in painting has changed somewhat, but at at the core of it, it has to do with balance. Balancing materials with your mind, balancing process with something else. Always keeping things in balance, whether it's something tangible or intangible. And I find that when I am working on a piece, I can always tell if it's off balance. And if it would be off balance, it would be too technique-oriented, or it would be too, on the flip side of that, it would be too uncommitted, too unconsidered. When a work, in my opinion, is happening, you've got both the materials and the message in balance, okay? And so what is that message that I'm talking about? Because every message is different. So what I want to do is tell you about what I intend as an artist to do. And it's pretty simple, but it is also very mysterious, okay? It is not, the big word, it is not my intention to try to deliver meaning. This painting means this. That is not my intention at all. It is my intention to evoke emotion, to evoke feeling. And this thing about evoking emotion or feeling has been at the core of my work from the very beginning. I think the last time I did a representational, I was still in undergraduate school, and I came into my very small little apartment, and there was a beam of light shining into the entrance of my little studio apartment. And the little dark hallway just had that little bit of light. And I had this kind of like feeling, it was just, there was something mysterious about it, the light coming, everything. And I painted it, I painted what I saw. But I realized that I wasn't trying to paint the door and the light. What I was trying to paint was the feeling that I had. And from that point forward, I realized that abstraction, or even non-objective art, was much more in my realm than doing representational work. Over the years, I have had many, many different artist statements, and this is no different. So I just want to let you know that my philosophy has, just like these paintings have, I've tried to core it down a little bit. So after working very diligently, I have brought my artist statement down to 3 sentences, okay? And this is, again, my philosophy in a nutshell. All right, here we go. I believe paintings can capture and emit the life force energy or spirit resonance, also known in Chinese philosophy as qi. Okay, I think this stuff is really powerful because somehow, don't ask me how, I don't know, but it can hold that life force energy, okay? So sentence number 2, the presence of this spirit resonance and not the resemblance of objects is the inherent principle of my painting philosophy, okay? So I've kind of boiled it down in a nutshell. Okay, so given that, how do I do what I do? That's what most people want to know. Okay, so I come into the studio and I basically will tell you that what I'm talking about is a mindset, okay? And the mindset has got a few ingredients, and these are just a few of them, but I'm going to list them because they're critical and they tie in very carefully to my philosophy. Okay, so the first thing is, again, this balance, material and what's going on in my mind. Okay, if I am going into the studio wanting it to be good, wanting it to be better, wanting it to be exhibited, wanting it to whatever, whenever I have that, I want, I have too much control, and then again, the balance gets off, okay? So the first thing is do not want, okay? Well, the counterbalance of not wanting is accepting, okay? Accept what is in front of you. Doesn't mean you can't change it. That's another thing, but okay. So do not want, and put my ego in the back seat. These paintings are not about me. These paintings come through me. These paintings are not about, Barbara had a bad day, on the farm, and my farm is red, and this is why this painting is red. No, they're not about me. When I first started painting, when I was a younger painter, the paintings did come from me. But lately, I would say for the last maybe 10 years, they're really coming through me. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. The next thing that I have when I come into the studio, this mindset, is to be open and untethered. That means, again, don't want, but have a mind open enough to go into the unknown, go fearlessly someplace that you don't know where it's going to be. You don't know what the result is going to be. So all this, these things are, going around in my head as little guidelines of how to have a day in the studio. I fight the familiar. If I find myself wanting to have a good day, wanting to feel good, I'll maybe go, oh, well, this looked good. Maybe I can repeat that, I want to fight that. I don't want to rest on my laurels and repeat something, because then I'm not really being true at all to my, my philosophy in painting, or my thought or belief in painting. So all of this takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of faith and patience, but it does happen. So I will explain to you how a regular day comes in. I've got all these things in my head somewhere, after doing this for 45 years, they're kind of in there. And I'll come to the studio, and the game plan is not necessarily to pick up where I left off on another painting. And I've got usually about 8 paintings going on at once. I'll come into the studio and I will look around. I never have the feeling like on your mark, get set, go. I wait. I wait until something starts to pull me at any one of the paintings. And that might be 10 minutes, it might be an hour, and I try again to be open, to relax, and not push or not force something to happen. And then I will eventually either do one thing. I'll come and start to work on a painting, and then I might work for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and I will at that point be totally, completely engaged. And these engagements, I have to tell you, it might sound a little woo-woo, but I have painted, I don't know how many paintings. And I have to say this because this is part of that mysterious process that happens in the studio that is so wonderful, but hard to explain. Okay, so I know I did this painting, and I know I did this painting, and all the paintings around here. But when I'm working, I am so in that flow, in that delivery system of it coming this way through me, that I don't remember painting any of it. And that is the truth, I mean, I know I did, but it's something that, and in the moment, like when I'm applying this, I'm there. But what I'm trying to say is when I stand back and look at this, it's not like I went, okay, and at that moment I picked up this and did that and did that. It's so in the moment that after all these years, I can honestly say that what artists have, what painters have, is they have the doing, they have the making. And it's not that they're objects to hold and keep and want, but my joy or my gift or whatever I have is in the making. When they're finished, when I'm no longer needed in the process, I can easily let them go. And when I look at them, it's not like I own them. I no longer own them because my engagement with them is finished. And so this thing of looking at them and knowing I did them, but not being able to go back to that moment and ever repeating it is something that I want to share with you guys as a part of my daily thing. So anyhow, I might move around in my studio, and I might start a painting. I might work on another painting. I might really have a day where nothing is, nothing's coming through, and I've got to relax. I've got to know that it'll happen again. And I would say after 4 or 5 or 6 hours, at one point nothing happens, I will make a couple of marks and maybe call it a day. For the most part, what I do is if I'm painting, let's say this one, painting, maybe, half hour goes by, and I stand back and I look at it, and there's the engagement or the dance has kind of stopped. What I will do is I will sit down and try to rebalance my brain again by doing something completely different. And what I'll do is, are you guys ready? I'll do Sudoku puzzles, and I find that if I take my right brain and put it aside and take my left brain and all of a sudden focus on these puzzles, then I'll look up and what I couldn't see, I'll have a moment of clarity again, okay? Because what was happening before is I was trying to push and again get this thing off balance, get my brain back, okay, just don't force it. Look, I'll put it someplace else, I'll come back, and it's almost like this weird veil is lifted. I can see again. So that's part of my process of the day. And the day starts at probably 11 o'clock. I like to have everything kind of behind me. There's a lot before I get into the studio. And then I want no interruptions at all until I'm getting ready to leave the studio. I have a sign outside my studio door. I'm on a NIM, N-I-M, no interruption mode. That has to be respected. So some mornings I'll go into the studio and I will take the other side, here's the mind, and I'll go to the materials side of this. And I will make some color bars, okay? Now the color bars are something that I started, I'm thinking it's been like 14 years, I think 14 years. And what happened is I used to paint and I was always trying to figure out a way to get more directly in there and not get out of that groove. And so I found as I'm painting and I'm standing back, I had to, in the past, reload my brush, mix it with the medium, go back and start to apply paint again. Well, during that mixing of the, putting the brush, loading it up with paint, I got out of the groove. My mind started saying, what brush? What size brush? Da-da-da-da. And so this flow was interrupted. And I thought, how can I get this flow to be more continuous? And I came up with all kinds of things. And 13 or 12, 14 years ago, I came up with color bars. But before that, I tried things like having a palette that was elevated up, right? Where I would just go, and there would be, but that didn't work. And I tried all kinds of things to have this more direct application happen. I tried to keep, overload the brush, and that wasn't working. And I used once an R&F pigment stick, and and the artists around here know what those are. They are the creme de la creme of pigment sticks or oil bars. And I picked one up and I started using it, and I said, oh, this is great, except the color was R&F's color. And it wasn't my color, and it wasn't a color I was particularly interested in. And I wasn't interested in mixing the color on the canvas or on the palette, because then I would be right back where I started from, and I would not have that directness. I would break the flow, right? So does it make sense? So I came up with this idea of I'll just make my own color bars, you know. So I call up R&F and I said, you know, what's your recipe for the, oh yeah, we're gonna tell you, right? Wrong. So I said, no problem, I'll figure this out. Well, hundreds of trial and error, and trial and error. And I'm not a chemist, right? I finally got the formula down, only to find that each pigment, well, let me explain what happens here. So I'll just pull out two colors here. I start with pigment, okay, and pigment, I stay away from the toxic pigments, so I try to, you know, do beautiful earth pigments from the south of France or something like that, or I love raw umber, and all these pigments, and then I will put them in a container and like take raw umber, a little bit of white, probably a little terre verte, and shake that up, right? And that's my color base. And then I have this formula now of my binding agent, and mix, mix, mix. It goes into my KitchenAid food processor, and mix, 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 mix. Then I take that after it has become, and this is critical, it has to mix enough so that all the pigment is covered with the oil. So when the mixing, when the concoction becomes shiny, I know that I'm in the right place, okay? So once it becomes shiny, which is like a half hour later, I take that concoction, which is still, room temperature, and I put it into a chocolate maker pot, which is at the right temperature, and it won't get too hot, but it'll be hot enough, and it'll melt that down, and that will become a liquid that I pour into a mold, and a half hour later. So basically, this is just oil paint that has enough wax in it to hold. But the minute I put any kind of pressure on this, it becomes this juicy, wonderful, luscious stuff. And I am in the total mindset that painting is a very sensuous experience. And if you are enjoying that sensuous experience, imagery opens up more than if it was something that you didn't like. It would close the door down, at least for me. I don't know about for other people. But so what this allowed me to do then is it allowed me to stay on the canvas for as long as I wanted. I could stay on the canvas for, I don't know, as long as this was over, until it went all the way down. I'm smiling because I'm looking at that painting across the room, and I'm looking at the color of my bar, and I'm remembering, So what I do with these colors is I don't want to, just like everything else that I'm doing, I don't want it pre-planned. I want to be in the moment. I don't want, okay? So each time I do a color, first, I do it without planning for any kind of painting, and I will do what, are you ready for this? What inspires me? The colors that make me go, oh. And if they don't do, then why would I want to put it? Okay, so then I make lots of these ahead of time, right? This is key, ahead of time. And I'll put them out on my palette, and then I'll start to almost arrange them like musical notes, okay? And then I might go, okay, I want this one too. Okay? And then when I'm painting, I don't have to look for a particular color. I am responding to this, the sound of color. Color is object, you know, and color goes first. That's what happens when I work. I start with color rather than form, or rather than mark making. I start with just this. I have, over the years, found different ways of cutting the process down to a little bit where it's not quite as time intensive or laborsome. But these color bars are at the core of how I keep these paintings immediate. Once they're on there, I can take my hand, or I can take like a spatula or whatever, and move it around. On rare occasion, I will use a brush to smear it around, but I don't see any of these really having much brushes. I don't think any of these do. I also want you to understand, with tube paint, I don't completely rule out tube paint at all. I have, just like I do the color bars, I will pre-mix colors, okay? And I'll put them in little bowls so that I have the colors ahead of time. And then, when I'm ready to paint any number of paintings, I will just look at what I have. This is so critical to my process that I'm not saying, okay, I want this shape to be this color. The color starts first and goes on, and it's not like I'm coloring something at all. I am applying something that is an object. And that change of sequencing that usually artists will take, you know, let's say a red barn and paint it red. They'll take a blue barn and paint it blue. Okay, this color starts first, and color is being opening the doors. Okay, just opening the doors to what's next. And so I might come into the studio and be inspired to make bars. Okay, and the colors might be similar. They might be completely different, but it's what will inspire me. And I will have a day of making color without the intention of what the color is going to be in any one particular painting. Another day I might come into the studio and just, you know, just the gods are with me, and I just might paint on 3 paintings, you know, and so the day goes. So this interaction with the work, which starts first as a total field of color, and I'll get into this a little bit with these later paintings, then gradually form comes, and this engagement goes back and forth, totally changing. I paint unstretched. I often start on the floor. I'll walk around. Again, not wanting, accepting, changing, and letting go of things that start to become too precious and make me think, oh, that's good. Let me hold on to something that's good, rather than looking at the whole piece and letting the whole piece breathe. And when I say breathe, I mean I look at the application of paint as putting it on, taking it off, putting it on, breathe in, breathe out, apply paint, remove paint. The balance, the yin, the yang, the tied in, tied out. It's all part of this back and forth, and not just. And each color is different. Like the reds, most reds will take a long time to dry, and the umbers dry in a day or so. So you have to understand that process. But what I do is, before I go back into the painting, I'll never go back into it when it's tacky. I'll wait for it to dry, or I'll do what I do more often is do wet into wet, So wet into wet is fine. And since I'm not using a medium, either with the tube bars or with the color bars, I don't have to worry that much about the irregular drying time. I can just let the natural chemistry of each pigment determine the drying time, and then I'll wait, I'll wait for it to be dry. The reason I have so much white in a lot of these paintings, except for that one, is because I like the idea of these forms not being representational, floating a little bit. They're not so grounded that they become landscapes, or they're not so grounded that they become objects. And if they're floating in white, one, it's a color that I can use a lot of. I could be covering this in any color, but I really have gravitated towards the kind of off-white, kind of this bone white color, because it will elevate the forms on there. And at one point the dance is finished, and then I'll look at it for a while, and eventually I'll be sure that it's not a one-time take where I'm looking at it and saying, oh, done, and the next day I look at it, what was I thinking? It's not done at all. So after a few, maybe a week or so, I'll know, definitely, yes, it's done. And then, and so it goes. And the imagery is interesting because as much as I don't know what's going to come, if I take an evolutionary trip of all the paintings I've done, they kind of start to change on their own, and different things come and go. And I don't fight that. I just let it happen. I don't harp too much on it. Oh, this is this shape, and this must mean so and so. I just kind of keep painting every day and do the analysis afterward. If I did the analysis during or ahead of time, I think it would keep them from, being as free as I hope they are. A dear friend of mine who lives in Australia, who is an artist-writer, Douglas Kahn, if you ever want to look him up, he wrote something, it's just one sentence, and I think it speaks of what these paintings are, okay? Oceans are not their surfaces. Okay? Now, energy and what is behind the surface is so much more about what these paintings are about, what you don't see, but the energy that's been there that you then do feel. So is seeing and feeling, how do those two things kind of mix? Where is the life force? Where is the energy? How does it get there? So if you think that oceans are not their surfaces, well, these paintings are not their surfaces either. The painting, what you see on the surface, but what you feel, what you're really relating to, is what's underneath. Just like with the ocean. I mean, think about it. The reason you get the sensation is not because of what you see on the surface, because it's everything that's happening underneath. Okay. Yes?
I have a question about that. Because, I totally know exactly, I totally feel what you're saying. But what I also will say is that your work feels like it's an extension of the kind of abex tradition, right? This abstract, expressive painting tradition. But the biggest proponent of that movement, Greenberg, was famous for saying surface is surface, form is form. You shouldn't strive for anything more. But you're talking about how these are not just surface. You're also making, so I'm wondering about how do you reconcile those sort of. Okay,
I'd love to answer that question. When I was in undergraduate and graduate school, which was a long time ago, they said painting is dead, right? And I think not. And I think abstraction or non-objective painting is not dead. And I think what he said was true at the time. I haven't written about it, but I'm painting about it. I'm painting that I think you respond to things that you don't see. And what you don't see is the artist is like a delivery system, and they will have, they will respond to temperature, they will respond to touch, they will respond to any number of things. And that is somehow, if the artist is not pretending, which is something artists can do, they can pretend, but if you're not pretending, then that comes through. And I'm going to give you just an example. I love fresh flowers, okay? I can have nothing in a room, and I'll have a vase of fresh flowers. Why is that? Because the fresh flowers still have that energy. I could have some waxed flowers or paper flowers, but they would not have that energy. You know? And I think that paintings, the powerful, magical, mystery thing about paintings is that the paintings still have that energy. They can hold that energy. Like, the surface of the ocean, all the energy that's underneath there, and you're looking at the top, but what you're responding to is what's happening underneath that you don't see. So, to answer your question, I think it's not about form, as a contemporary French philosopher says that the great image has no form. The great image has no form. Yes?
Mary, go ahead.
Okay. When you first began, I enjoyed your talk so much. It was so informative and so personal, so thank you.
Yeah.
When I first was listening to you speak, I made the assumption that you paint in silence with no distractions, but you refer to the color bars as musical notes. Mm-hmm. So I wondered if during your process you were listening to something, or maybe you listened to something before you came into your studio, because your work is about feeling.
Yeah. I love the question because two things are true. I'll either do silence or I will do instrumental music. I won't do music that has lyrics to it, because the lyrics are asking you to be transported to someplace specific. And I'm going not to, some preconceived place. I'm going to someplace open. So my number one fan, Beethoven, sorry. I love to listen to Beethoven. But I also find that I'll listen to music, while I'm sitting and contemplating, but often when I'm working, it'll be quiet. The music will be turned down and it'll be silent, And again, none of this is like fact for another artist. My husband, Ed Burrell, he has to have the television or some sound going all the time because his mind is working so much that he has to have the noise, otherwise his inner brain, I call it his hamster, won't shut up, So he panics when he walks by my studio because it's quiet in there, and it makes him feel uncomfortable. I go by his studio and, he's got some old, shoot 'em up cowboy thing, but we're both kind of trying to get to the same place. So, as you get to it, however it works. But for me, it's calm. I like calm. I think, too, with music, again, you can wake up that energy, life force, that chi or whatever you have. And I think the thing that is so exciting about paintings is you're bringing them into a place that is not, it's not outdoors, it's, inside, and you're bringing that energy inside, and I think that's, good. Okay, questions?
So I was going to ask you mentioned that you don't use toxic pigments, but you have the most amazing white going on here, and so I was curious, how did you arrive at that? Because it almost looks like lead white, but that is toxic, and so
Yeah.
you're doing something else. And then the second thing was your paintings definitely remind me of like two artists who I really like, and so maybe you can talk a little bit about your influences or which artists that you admire.
Sure. So the white is a mixture, and again, over the years, and Liz will be able to tell you that, and Daniel will be able to tell you that. That white has changed, it's gone from a little warmer to, this is a more neutral, but like I said, either with this, and this is mixed white, it's not pure white, I'll have a big container of it, and it doesn't have any cadmium in it at all. The other thing is my influences. I'm influenced two ways. I'm influenced by what artists say, and then I'm influenced by their work. So, for example, Rothko, when I was much younger, I was influenced by his work, the actual visual work of it. Bryce Marden, one of my big heroes who just died a little over a year ago, I was really influenced by what he said, less by his work, but more by his words. Cy Twombly, both. Both. And Twombly, his process and his intention is much different than mine, but the doing, the mindset of just, being, in the moment and being lost, I think is very much the same. He would sit there and say, okay, he'd look at the empty canvas or one that he had worked on for hours and hours, and then make some marks, and then, that was it. But he had a lot of thinking behind, like mythology and so forth.
Is that something you do too, like think about books or poetry?
No, and what I do most, and I didn't really think about it until after people started asking me, it's more of an old Zen Buddhist kind of thinking. Yes, very much. So I like the ancient Chinese. I am just mad about their thinking, and I love their reasoning of why their artwork looks the way it does, and why Western artwork tries to, reproduce and idealize the forms, and they don't do that at all. They're after something completely different. They're after that spirit resonance, which is totally what I'm after, in my work. Yes?
When you're working, are you often always keeping the painting oriented the same way, or are you also flipping it around and coming at it from every direction?
In the beginning, I flip it around quite a bit. Again, because I don't know where it's going. And so, but closer to the end, and I flipped this one less because of the size, but I did flip it, and it was a bear to flip. But towards the end, it's really starting to settle in one orientation, and it's always, people say, well, your work is abstract, do you mind if I hang it sideways? And I said, yes, I mind very much if you hang it sideways. This is the way it's supposed to, so it definitely has an orientation when it's done.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah.
Great, very good. Barbara's exhibition's on view through November 2nd, and I want to thank M. Guth for being here. Distant Dreamers on view through the end of the day. We open Anne Hamilton first Thursday, new work by Anne Hamilton. I want to thank Stephen Hayes for being here. We have work of his in the office, and Julia Mangle, whose work is up also in the back. Thank you all for coming. We'll be here. You're welcome to mingle, ask questions, and enjoy the day and the exhibition. Thank you, Barbara.